Well, hi everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Certified Forgotten. We are still, and always will be, I think I'm comfortable saying that, the only horror podcast that talks about movies with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. As always, I am one half of your Matt hosts. I am Matt Monagle. I am joined now. So a quick note for folks, we record with video on because it's really good for chemistry and dynamics with us and our guests. Obviously, you don't get to see that with the podcast, but my boy Donato here is rocking the Con Air Nick Cage like swipey glitter pillow in the background, which is really, I feel like it's going to throw me off the entire episode. So I'm sort of bummed that you have that there, Donato.
I'm still in the process of finding places for everything in the new apartment. Like, everything looks good at this point. I've hung up my vinyl shelves. I've got everything in a workable order. Like, Chucky has his place where he's just staring at me as I record now. But yeah, a few things like sequin pillows with Nick Cage's face on them haven't found their way to their home yet.
Are you in the, I know that you're kind of, like you said, still setting up, but because you do the live stream with Perry, are you working on your like little studio / visual background area for when you're on video?
I'm trying to. The only problem is the way that we have separated. So I moved into a townhouse that has 3 floors. Middle is communal floor, bottom is my floor, top is somebody else's. And I don't get great Wi-Fi down where I am for some reason. So I have to figure out, I think we talked about it when Cargill was on the podcast. I got to get those extenders. I got to figure out my situation. Because right now I just do it on my bar in the communal area. So like best Wi-Fi, best everything. I do want to get my little section though with all my nice little, I don't know, I want to hang some posters up maybe with my quotes on them because I have an ego. Why not?
Well, Donato, if you're slightly uncomfortable in your recording environment, that just means I'm going to have to work extra hard to make this a good episode. But you know what our secret weapon is for this episode?
It's not about us.
We've got a great guest. Yeah.
When it's on our backs, we don't need that. There's enough straight white mats in the horror community. You don't have to give a shit about our opinions. It's about other people's opinions, let's be honest. And with that said, as the introduction to the guest this week, I would like to bring in someone I followed for a very long time, someone who's written about horror remakes as well. So there's a kinship in that article writing. So it's going to be Kim Morrison from Ghouls Magazine and just a general horror entertainment journalist. Kim, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, Kim, I have to say, anytime that I get the opportunity to connect with somebody that writes for Ghouls, it's really exciting for me because I feel like that's become, you know, on our best days, I would hope that Certified Forgotten is one of those sites where if somebody sees that you've written for it, you're like, oh, that's a good byline. This person knows what they're talking about. And for me, Ghouls is definitely every writer that I admire and follow that writes specifically within horror, a lot of horror in particular, writes for Ghouls. So Donato was like, oh, we're going to get Kim on the show. And I was like, yes, we got that Ghouls credibility. I love it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, it's an amazing site to be part of. I was very lucky to be sort of asked to be in it when they first kicked off. And I now sort of manage all their social media stuff as well. So it's a lot of fun. And yeah, everyone who writes for it's amazing. Our group chat is absolute chaos, but it's a lot of fun and I've made a lot of pals through it. So it's nice.
That's great to hear. Well, we always start with our guests by kind of talking about the early days of horror. And you know, sometimes we have folks on the podcast that I feel like I followed forever. I've been connected to on social media forever, and I'm kind of like passively aware of what they've been doing. But I don't think I've ever had an opportunity to meet you in person, and we certainly haven't had an opportunity to record a podcast yet. So I'm personally really excited to kind of hear about your horror journey, so I can start putting some backstory to the person that I see tweeting and sharing stuff online. So Kim, let's talk about kind of the early days of you as a horror fan. What were your origins, that first scary movie, that first scary book, the thing that made you think, hold on, this is for me?
I feel like my mum and dad are both massive horror fans. So there was a lot of stuff like in the house when I was growing up. I have distinct memories of like staring at the back of the VHS cover of The Lost Boys, like that picture of Kiefer Sutherland, like all vamped out and being like, oh my God, I really want to watch this. But I think my first stuff was, which I feel like it probably is for a lot of people my age, but it was the miniseries of Stephen King's It. My parents had that taped off the television, and it was so long that I didn't realize until I got it on DVD years later that I had never seen like the last 15 minutes because the VHS was only like 3 hours long, and with all the like adverts and everything all the way through it, I hadn't actually seen the whole chunk of like Audra and Bill on the bike or anything. So yeah, I watched that when I was like, I'm not sure, maybe like 7 or 8. I think probably I have an 8-year-old daughter just now, so I'm slightly aware of how probably not the best idea that was. But my mum and dad were very good at like allowing me to watch horror, but sort of like vetoing it first. I wasn't allowed to watch any like slashers. I remember being like desperate to watch Freddy Krueger and like Halloween and then things, and they weren't super keen on that. But I do remember getting to watch like Poltergeist and The Shining and things where I was a bit older, like the stuff that they thought were like kind of horror classics, but that I wasn't going to be too traumatized watching. Because there was one night where my mum was out and my dad was babysitting me, and he let me watch like the 80s remake of The Blob. And we got to the bit where the person's like getting like consumed in the phone box, and I had to leave. I was like, no, that's too much. And then I had like nightmares about it for weeks. So I think it was good to do it in that way. And then I think books as well, it was kind of Stephen King. I remember being like desperate to read it, which is obviously a very chunky book. And as a like 10-year-old or however I was when I first attempted it, I got through that first sort of chunk at the beginning about 4 or 5 times before I actually managed to read it the whole way through. But yeah, it was due to having quite nice horror loving parents and them sort of helping me source things. My dad used to have like satellite TV when we didn't have it in my house, so he used to like tape me, like he taped Scream and things, and he'd bring it out and like give it to me, because like we didn't have like Sky in my house until like I was in high school. So it was basically just what's on these 5 terrestrial channels that we have, and that was the only access I kind of had. So my mum and dad were quite good at kind of shipping horror into the house for me so that I could watch all the good stuff.
I know that we don't always get a chance to talk about parenting on the podcast, but since you mentioned the fact that you're raising an 8-year-old daughter, thinking back to your own origins with horror, how are you approaching in the year 2023 having somebody that probably, if this is around and about for you, somebody who's expressing interest, maybe curiosity about the kind of movies and books that you're watching? How are you approaching that as a parent and starting to think about what a horror genre could look like for your kid?
Yeah, I'm definitely trying to like not traumatize her at an early age. I obviously have a lot of horror stuff like round about my house. She's obsessed with Pennywise, like the newer version, which is obviously, I wouldn't let her see that one for a while because that's a bit more traumatic than the 90s version. And she was begging me the other day to watch Friday the 13th because I've got like a Jason plush, and she was like, please. I was like, no. But what we're trying to do is sort of like go through all the more kind of family friendly stuff. We've been watching like the Ghostbusters films and like Beetlejuice. And we're sort of working up to things maybe like Jaws and things that are a bit actual scarier, but not like super violent or anything. She used to ask to watch like the Goosebumps TV series on Netflix when it was on over here. She got a bit freaked out of that when she was a wee bit younger, but she's started kind of showing interest again. So I'm trying to like nurture it in her, I guess, but not like put her off it by like showing her stuff too young, because I think when I was young I liked being scared. If some like watching The Blob, it terrified me and I had to not watch the end, but it made me want to go back and like watch stuff, whereas I think she's a bit like she gets scared and then she kind of goes off stuff a bit. So it's trying to just like find the things that she enjoys, and then she wants I have a figure of Creature from the Black Lagoon. She noticed that the other day and was like, is that a film? And I was like, yes, it is. I have a whole box set. So we watched like 3 of those films in a row. She really liked those. And I thought that was quite cool because that's like a more like a better horror history introduction, I think, than like I had, going back to kind of like the vintage stuff as well. And I do have a lot of those kind of older ones on DVD and things that are the rating on them is like 12 or like PG or whatever. So I can hopefully show them to her without scaring her too much. So yeah, I'm trying to kind of follow the same kind of path that my mum did, of just kind of showing her stuff that feels suitable. But she does like watching videos on YouTube of people playing like Five Nights at Freddy's and other horror games that I don't really know what they are, and trying to like keep an eye on her when she's watching stuff so that she doesn't freak herself out. But she has quite a good knowledge of stuff. She plays Roblox, and there's a lot of like kind of homemade horror characters on there, and she's like, oh, that's the guy from Scream and that's Chucky, and I'm like, yes, you're well done, but you won't see those films until you're at least like double digits.
Well, and that's the importance of gateway horror too, and I think we forget about that sometimes as more veteran horror fans. And we watch something and it's like, oh, it's not as scary as I want it to be, or it's not as this, not as that. Thinking like especially of something I just watched like Cobwebs or something like The Boogeyman. Like that's a little more higher level gateway, don't get me wrong. Yeah. The scares are there. But then you drop another level, and there is something so important about giving a newer horror fan the right entryway, because I got the reverse. I did not have a horror loving family. I did not have any kind of introduction, any kind of history or anything like that. So everything was going about it at my pace, to say. And especially early on in my life, I've talked about this on the podcast a lot. So like, I won't get into it that much, but definitely an anxious kid, definitely afraid of everything. And instead of starting small and building myself up with horror, I was just like a kid who really didn't know that horror existed as deeply as it does. And I would just see a trailer for, again, Bride of Chucky, which we know is the funny comedy, and then like even Seed a little bit. Again, the more crazy comedy aspect of it. And I would see like a trailer and it would just like petrify me. So like not having the right introduction, not having the right headspace, I was like, nope. And that put me off horror. Like that put me off it for years. So like I'm sure for a parent, it's doubly as hard because again, like you're trying to set them up for success and you're trying to set them up. So like, well, actually, like going off of that, like, are you more aware of like gateway horror?
Yeah, I think we've been trying to like just have a look at the ones that are kind of more suitable for her. I guess when I was little, like I said, I just kind of watched whatever there was, like whatever I could get my hands on. It's much easier to kind of get everything on streaming now. So it's trying to like make the effort to find that kind of stuff and show it. Like we just watched Gremlins as well, which I think is a 15 and she's only 8, so it's maybe not. But it's still it was on the TV in the daytime, so I think they maybe cut out like the blender.
It's fine, yeah. If it's on the TV in the daytime, it's fair game.
It wasn't super violent. So yeah, it's just trying to like I was a massive and still am, if you could see my living room, a massive Nightmare Before Christmas fan. So I like watched that a lot as a kid. So yeah, things like she watched that young. She watched a lot of Scooby-Doo when she was little. Like that was the trying to just introduce her to all the monsters. And it's also a good argument for, look, the monsters are very rarely real. They're usually just like a guy in a mask. Like trying to explain that to her about when we watch stuff. I'm like, yeah, no, it's just an actor and they're just dressed up. Like it's not a real thing. So I'm hoping that's given her a good understanding of it. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more things now. Things like the Goosebumps films, and I know we had like the TV series when I was a kid and things, but sort of, yeah, just being able to build her up with that, I guess, knowledge of all the things that could exist within the monstery, horror-y world, not necessarily in the most terrifying way possible. And then we'll build her up to that.
One following question on that. What's the one movie that you can't wait to show your child? But like, you can't yet, but like, what's the one that you can't wait to get to? I
mean, I have really... I watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time when I was 12, and I only remember this because it got like unbanned from being shown on TV over here. So Channel 4 showed it here at like 12 o'clock at night, and I remember arguing with my mum. I was like, you need to let me watch this. This is like a cultural phenomenon. You can't. And I had no knowledge what it was about, apart from obviously the title's kind of self-explanatory, but I'd never like really had any exposure to it apart from a picture of Leatherface. And I remember watching that and being absolutely terrified and like hiding under my covers. And for me, that was like an amazing horror experience. So something like that, or like the original Black Christmas, that like genuinely scared the absolute shit out of me the first time I watched it. I can't wait to show her stuff like that when I feel like she's able to properly get that like kind of fear, like huddled in the dark with the lights off kind of scary reaction. So yeah, I think stuff like Texas Chainsaw is kind of the one that pops to mind just because it absolutely terrified me. But like Halloween's my favorite like slasher ever, so I guess that's pretty high up as well in what I would like to show her. But yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it helps or hurts, but I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time at 37, and that movie fucked me up at like 2 years ago. If like it, just watching it in the middle of the day in my house, it is a deeply unsettling and uncomfortable film. So, I mean, I guess one takeaway could be there's no good age to watch it. So have her watch it now, I guess. Like there is no good time. So she might as well. She's 8. She's ready.
I know. God, yeah, that's been, yeah, I'm sure she'll be a lot older because that one is obviously, it's not super gory, but there's a lot of implied gore and very scary. But it was just such a very memorable experience of how terrifying that was, and I hope that she comes to enjoy the fear eventually, and then we'll have fun with films like that when she gets to watch them.
Well, when thinking about your own journey again, getting out of this nexus, not being traumatized like Donato, still having space to be like, yep, I'm still a horror fan. When did you start to approach writing about film? Was that something that you were kind of doing on your own website, your own blog, something like that? Was it something that through schooling it had an opportunity? I'm always curious when people make that leap between I really enjoy consuming this to like I actually want to put some stuff down somewhere about what I think about it.
Weirdly, it wasn't until I want to say it was maybe like 2018, 17. It wasn't that long ago, actually, which is weird because I did do a lot of like blogging and things. I used to have like a craft blog. So I did a lot of writing kind of on the side. And when I was in university, I did like public relations, but I did like a kind of side course about, it was like journalism in media, basically. And the only A I ever got on an essay was one I wrote about representations of like women news casters in horror films. So I wrote about Scream and The Howling and To Die For, and that was the only A I ever got. So that really should have been like an indication that if you write about something you're actually interested in, you might get like a better result with it. But my boyfriend actually, Phil, he used to run this site with his friend Kieran, who I believe Matt knows, called That's Not Current. And I had kind of pitched to them, they were looking for writers, and I had said, oh, I've kind of been thinking about writing about like horror remakes and their originals, because I seem to love a lot of terrible remakes that people don't like. So I was like, I would like to talk about that. And they were like, yeah, no, come write for us. So I wrote for them for a couple of years, and I was lucky enough that they let me just kind of do a few lists and things, and one of which was my like top horrible ankle injuries, which is like my thing that I look for in every horror film, like just grotesque ankle injuries, mainly due to the.
Can I stop you there? I have to ask why ankle injuries. That's such a specific thing.
I don't know. It's just it was because of House of Wax, like the remake, when Jared Padalecki gets his Achilles tendon snipped, and then also Paris Hilton gets like a knife through the back of her heel, which is kind of ankle adjacent. And then also the guy in Hostel getting his Achilles tendon slashed. They were just like, I was like, these are the ones that really get to me. Like, I'm not a big gore lover in general, but something about ankle injuries that really gives me like the ick. So I started looking out for them, and there's tons of really horrible ones with either just people getting like their foot smashed in, or Achilles tendons, or things like that. So yeah, that was one of the first like kind of very specific lists that I wrote. And now apparently like everyone at Ghouls is just like, you're just the queen of strange lists. And I was like, I have a Trello board that is just like every strange thing I see in a horror film, and then if I get enough for a list, I'm like, right, I'm gonna write about that. But I wrote for them for a few years. They sadly sort of like stopped functioning, so I started my own blog, which is called Little Red Horror, and I sort of moved a lot of my strange lists and things to there. But when Ghouls got started, which I think was it 2 years ago now, they sort of put a call out on Twitter, because Zoe, who runs Ghouls, I'd written for her personal site a few times. I'd done some reviews and things, and I sort of just knew her through like a horrorness on Twitter. She put out a call being like, does anyone know any cool like female or non-binary like horror writers? And like quite a few people nominated me, and I was like, oh my god, it's like you just assume that no one ever reads your stuff, so it's nice to know that people are reading it, and kind of thought so. Zoe kind of reached out to me when they first started, and so I write for them quite regularly. I do my Mother of Fears column, which is on like representations of mothers in horror from different kind of angles, and then also try and keep up the the bananas list, write in and do some reviews and stuff, and mainly just sort of write for my own blog. But it was I'm surprised it kind of took me so long, and I think that's what my boyfriend kind of said to me. He was like, why aren't you writing about this? Like, this is the thing that you love and you want to like talk about it all the time. Like, it makes sense to kind of focus on that. I used to be a copywriter in my day job. I do more like social media stuff now, but it was like all the bits were there. I just never sort of really put them together. So yeah, it's been amazing. It's so nice to just it's really helped me like connect with loads of like-minded people, and also just sort of get into write about all these films that you love. It's amazing. It's a lot of fun.
Any episode we can reference Kieran is a good episode.
Yeah.
That little chaos demon. I keep trying to get him on the podcast, and like he's like, all right, what about this like micro budget movie that no one's? I'm just like, dude, all right, like give me something a little more, bud. Like, come on.
Yeah, me and him have very conflicting horror opinions. The first time I came around to my boyfriend's house before he was my boyfriend, me and Kieran were just sitting arguing about which Fright Night was better, like the original or the remake, and he was very like, the remake's better, and I was like, I am walking out of this house. Like, I don't.
Listen, Kieran has terrible opinions, but that is one I will back him on. You have another fight brewing on this podcast.
It's fine. I've got. It's a few years later. I've gotten over it.
That's okay.
Well, I was going to say, Donato, from what I've heard, we can't invite Kieran on the podcast because it'll end up being 3 hours long and it'll be your edit and you'll be miserable about it, right?
Yeah, R.I.P. Silent Night, Deadly Night, the podcast dedicated to Christmas horror fucking commentary. But he'll never be allowed on the podcast because he will bring up just to needle me that the remake of Black Christmas is better than the original, and I will go off. I will not be able to stop.
I have a soft spot for that one. We can all lose respect for each other in real time if we need to, but I think it's safe to say everybody has their favorites on those couple. I want to ask too a little, Kim, if you want to talk a little bit about being a horror writer, a horror journalist, and a member of the community from Edinburgh, because I think that there are, when we think in the States about the places where horror congregates, it's the usual. It's like LA and New York, right? So there are these kind of global and regional hubs where it's really easy to be a horror fan and gain access to a community, go to events, go to screenings, all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious about what your experience has been as somebody in the industry that's in a place that I don't think of necessarily as getting, a lot of attention, certainly when it comes to releases, but also being a little bit behind, the Hollywood release cycle as well. How do you navigate that as a horror journalist?
Yeah, it's difficult. Like, even a lot of the Ghouls writers even are like based down in London or the south of England. So even like stuff that can come through from there, like getting to go to press screenings and stuff, there's not always the opportunity. It's kind of cool because, well, we used to have the Edinburgh Film Festival. I don't know, it's kind of gone a bit under this year. I don't know what's happening, but that was nice to have it close in, like the Glasgow Film Festival and then the Glasgow version of Fright Fest. Glasgow's quite close to Edinburgh. It's only like 45 minutes away, so that it was quite nice from that kind of angle. But yeah, no, it can be a challenge. I guess you're quite lucky if you can get screeners through to stuff, but things like even like Pearl, I don't even know if Pearl actually came out in the cinema. Like I couldn't get it in a local cinema. It took months. There's a huge difference between when it came in America versus when it came in the UK, but I think it only came out in like 4 or 5 cinemas and none of them were near me. And I live very close to Edinburgh and Glasgow, so or there was no good times. There was like one showing or thing. So it feels strange because you do think like there wouldn't be such a disconnect, I guess, between stuff like that. And it still feels like there is a bit. And yeah, even sort of being a couple of weeks behind on films, like I think Talk to Me came out in America this week, maybe. Someone I followed on Twitter was going absolutely nuts because she's been seeing spoilers for it already, which has happened to like a few things. So I think being very online and trying to navigate that sort of disconnect can be a bit of a challenge, trying to like not get stuff spoiled for yourself. But yeah, it would be nicer to even just live a lot closer to a lot of people. You just feel like you don't have a lot of opportunities. I have a few pals who live sort of close by who do like podcasts and stuff. It's nice to do stuff with them in person. Like we've gone to like film festivals and stuff together. But yeah, even just being in Scotland, like a lot of the big horror festivals down through here or even like down in the south of England and stuff, which can be a challenge, especially me with a child and everything to try and like get to organize the time. So it does feel like a bit disconnected. Like it would be a bit easier if I lived somewhere else. But then again, a lot of the films I write about are tend to looking back on kind of older ones and things as well. I don't do as many reviews as other people. I tend to do more like lists and kind of retrospectives and things. So it's sort of fine on that account. But yeah, it can be a bit annoying sometimes, but I'm hoping it'll get a bit better. But it's nice that kind of how like compared to like a few years ago, even just how kind of fast stuff goes to streaming and things these days, even the ability to like rent stuff like through Amazon and things does make it a bit easier. You're not having to wait like as long for stuff to get like a physical release or whatever. So that makes it a bit easier in that respect. But I would love to live a bit. It'd be nice to just even live closer to like the rest of the ghouls. It would be a nice thing to sort of have that like a bit more of a community around about you. I think that's why I am on like Twitter and things so much, because you talk to everyone like in different countries, different parts of the world, and sort of make up the community that way.
Yeah, it's always, I mean, you think about, oh, well, I live in Austin, Texas. So that's a major city in the United States, a major city in Texas. But, if I want to go see Cobweb, which is opening this weekend, it's only playing in a movie theater that's about 40 minutes away. Yeah. So what I get to do is the same thing. I texted Donato and I was like, hey, this is 40 minutes away. Is this worth a drive? And he was like, for you, probably. And because it's a darker movie, so you're definitely going to want to see it on a big screen, yada, yada. But it's just sort of like, we think of film, and I think a lot of people outside of the film industry think this is sort of like this, like everybody like gets to see it, and by the time a movie is hit, theaters, everybody's had an opportunity. But it's always fun to talk to people, especially that are sort of writing for the types of publications that we run and that we frequent as writers ourselves, because I feel like y'all really understand those challenges and how, horror movies in particular seem to live in this area. Like blockbusters play in movie theaters, smaller films go direct to video. Horror is always a crapshoot. They may play in some theaters, and they may play direct to video, go streaming.
Mm-hmm.
They may get a international release, or they may play in just New York and LA for a hot minute. And so I feel like horror is this one area where we're all just sort of like, what is it? Is it gonna, no? Okay. Am I okay? Fine. Tell me if I can, because I'd love to see this somewhere.
I do remember it was years ago. It's a very old example, but when Hatchet, like the first Hatchet came out, I remember seeing trailers for it and I was so excited. And it was literally playing at one cinema that's maybe like 45-minute drive away, and it was playing, there was like one showing on like a Monday night, and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I had to like talk a bunch of pals, and I was like, you need to go and see this, it looks amazing. Like driving them away across to like the other side of town to go and see this like random, and I mean it was amazing. I'm very glad I went to see it in the cinema. But yeah, it's just that kind of, I guess I feel like it's maybe not a fair thing to put on us, but I think maybe horror fans are so like into the genre that they are willing to like make that little bit of extra effort where possible to go and see stuff, but they should just give stuff like wider releases, because there's a lot of good stuff that I don't know, you don't always get the chance. It kind of slips out of the cinema really quickly and then you miss it, and then when you do see it you're like, oh man, that would have been amazing to see it on the big screen.
Yeah, it's always so curious because like horror is one of the most dependable genres in theaters. I mean, we saw that even with something as silly as Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which is a terrible movie. But if you put a movie about a killer Winnie the Pooh in theaters, like, yeah, horror fans are going to come out just for the curiosity aspect alone. And I think that is something that we, as people very invested in the genre and who write about it and cover it, like we're seeing it a little more because we do know all those tiny micro budget films and low budget horror films out there worth watching. Like, they're never going to get the theatrical representation they deserve. So like it's that balancing act of like, everything can't go, we know that, but at the same time, something like Pearl, again, just mentioning that for you, obviously, or just certain horror movies that go straight to VOD over here. It's becoming very odd, especially with the window being so decreased right now. And I don't know, if that window is ever going to go back up, but hey, you don't have to see Halloween Kills in theaters because it'll be on Paramount Plus or whatever streaming service it goes to in 40 days, 45 days. So it's like, yeah, it's becoming like there's less incentive to put things in theaters in a way, but also at the same time, like you need to put them in theaters. Like that's where the money's made.
Well, last question for you then, Kim, and then we have to get to the movie that you brought for us today. I want to ask, as somebody that's working for Ghouls Magazine, a labor of love, a growing business, right? Like a growing community, both online and off. We're hearing a lot, especially because we're recording this on Barbenheimer weekend. We're hearing a lot of conversations about the state of the film industry, the state of film criticism, the state of film fandom. We're having all of the strike conversations about influencers versus journalists and all those kind of lines. And so especially when folks are working so specifically to grow one thing, we have conversations with freelancers all the time and they have a very clear perspective on how they feel the industry is going. But as somebody that's trying to grow a publication in the year 2023, which is a shared madness that all three of us have, how do you feel? Like, how are you feeling about the state of horror journalism, the state of film journalism, and the state of horror kind of in general?
I think it's a weird one because I don't know if you guys get this a lot over there, but like a lot of the big like sort of newspapers definitely over here write things about horror films, and it feels like they give the assignments to someone who's never watched a horror film in their life, and then they basically like just come out and write this absolutely like kind of scathing piece of journalism, like calling the whole genre rubbish because they watched like one film and things. I think it feels quite challenging because it's such a big like genre and it's super exciting, but I feel like the people who are super passionate about horror, and we sort of, a lot of us just write about it like on the side alongside our day jobs, like don't get those opportunities, and then people who clearly have no love for the genre get to write about it, and rather than sort of potentially bringing loads of new people to it. They're sort of turning them off it and going on the, because they don't have a personal love for it. They clearly obviously like film if they're writing about it, but they don't have that same thing about horror. So it sometimes feels it feels like a bit of a challenging one. That feels like there's loads of people out there who write about horror and love horror like all over the world, but a lot of the sort of big exposure stuff sometimes feels like it's not, like, it's not getting the love it deserves, I guess, because it's not getting necessarily the best kind of people to write about it. So I feel like going to sites like ours, like yours, like smaller ones and things, I mean, obviously bigger horror focused ones like Bloody Disgusting and things are good as well. It just like to get that level of horror love that you want rather than looking for in the normal kind of places, because chances are it's not going to be kind of what you're looking for as a horror fan. So I think we're quite lucky that there's so many people out there who do it as either as a job or kind of like as a thing on the side, like we do, of showing their appreciation for it. I think it's I've only really had like really nice experiences as well with the sort of horror community. The only thing I ever get that annoys me is when I write a lot of lists. Whenever I put a list up, someone's like, "You forgot this," like the most basic bitch. And like I did a TikTok that was like, here's some folk horror films, and it was all ones that I like owned on Blu-ray. And someone was like, "What about The Wicker Man?" And I was like, "Well, obviously The Wicker Man, yeah, okay, but also I don't own that on DVD, so that's why it's not in the TikTok." But that's the only thing that annoys is people feel the need to like correct me on my list opinion. So I'm like, no, it's my terrible list about my terrible choices. Like, leave me alone. But yeah, I've only really had nice experiences, and it's amazing to just kind of discover all these people. I think especially on Ghouls, there's a lot of really like interesting, like in-depth essays. And I know like Molly writes the Uterus horror column for you guys, which is like absolutely amazing, right up my street. Anything like period related horror films is like amazing, and anything like fully kind of female experience is brilliant. So you sort of have to seek out the places where the people are writing the amazing stuff, and you sort of connect with all these brilliant people online. So yeah, I think they could do a bit better over here, definitely, of sort of having a better mainstream representation, I guess, of horror stuff, of horror journalism stuff. But I do think that there's a lot of like amazing stuff going on. I think just maybe give some people take the back seat when it comes to talking about horror, and give some other people the chance to kind of share the love on it would be a bit nicer.
It's the joke of every October, waiting for the Vanity Fairs or the Varieties or whatever major publication to write that article. Hey, horror's back! Like, all right, bitch, it never went away. Get out of here.
Yeah, no more articles about elevated horror, please. Let's write about something else.
We're on to trauma horror. What do you mean? We got a TM trademark trauma horror.
Well, no more articles about elevated horror is the one thing that I know we all agree on. So that feels like a really good place to end the first half of our discussion, because when we come back, we got to talk about one of those uterus horror type horror films, right? We got to talk about one of those coming of age, intergenerational trauma horror films that I think folks will have a really fun time with. So when we come back, we're going to talk about Urban Legends Bloody Mary. Hey everyone, thank you so much for supporting this episode of Certified Forgotten. I want to remind you that if you would like to find new ways to support both the podcast and our website, certifiedforgotten.com, we do have a Patreon, and I'm going to recommend our 3 most popular tiers. For only $1 a month, you can be a website supporter. We appreciate you. You help support everything that we do, help provide cutting-edge film criticism on the topic of horror. For $3 a month, you will get a monthly video recommendation from myself and my colleague, partner in crime, and friend, Matt Donato, walking you through some of the new to us horror, including films, books, and games. And for $6 a month, you get not only the video recommendations, you also get one exclusive article a month for Patreon followers only, where I grapple with a movie of Donato's choosing. He puts me through the ringer. We call the column Film School from Hell, and he picks a lot of horror that I would not otherwise watch. So even though it is my writing, I promise you that Donato's presence can be felt throughout. So if you would like to check out those or any of our other Patreon tiers, you can visit us at patreon.com/certifiedforgotten. We appreciate your support. And now, back to the show. Welcome back. So the film that Kim has brought for us today is Urban Legends Bloody Mary. This is the third film in the Urban Legends series, I guess trilogy, technically you could call it, and the only one to receive a direct-to-video release. The film was written by Michael Dougherty and directed by Mary Lambert, and it follows high school student Sam Owens, played by Kate Mara, but look quickly and you'll see her sister in the movie too, the victim of a vicious prank by the high school football team. But when the players who pulled the prank start mysteriously ending up dead, Sam discovers that their small Utah town is repeating a decades-old cycle of violence, and that the original victim, a high school girl named Mary Banner, may have returned from the dead to exact her revenge. Kim, as always, we're going to start with you. You have a list, actually pinned to your Twitter profile, of movies that you will talk about anywhere, anytime, for any reason. And this is one of the films on that list. Mm-hmm. So normally we say, "Hey, why do you bring this movie to us?" You've tweeted it. The proof is right there. We know why you brought this movie to us. But what is it about it that you love so much?
So I when I was like a teenager, or I guess younger, because Urban Legends came out in like 1997, I think, I was a huge fan of the first two. I had them on DVD. I used to watch them all the time. I went to uni and did like a half film degree, so I used to watch Urban Legend Final Cut like on repeat and be like, I'm going to be as cool as these guys. And I didn't see the third one until maybe like 5-6 years ago. I'm not sure. I'd sort of heard it didn't have the best reputation, and even the cover art, the DVD, even the title screen on the film is like, oh man, this looks like it's going to be terrible. But my favorite Stephen King thing ever is Pet Sematary, and Mary Lambert directed 1 and 2. And I think when I realized that she directed 3, I was like, all right, okay, I actually have some faith in this one now. I should watch it. So I had to hunt the DVD down like secondhand and watch it. And there's no argument that some of the effects are terrible in it, but I feel like I'm a huge fan of The Rage Carrie 2. I watched that when I was like a teenager. It was like the perfect kind of new metal-y like horror film, that exact age when I was a teenager. It was perfect. And I feel like it's quite similar to that, where people sort of write it off for being bad because it's not like, it's obviously a sequels to more popular films and it has some like terrible kind of effects in it, but I think there's sort of, it has this kind of deeper message of like not being quite a rape revenge film, but definitely like in that sort of wheelhouse of female raged revenge of this thing that has happened. And I think, I just feel like it maybe gets written off a little bit because of really bad CGI spiders and people being like, why would you make a supernatural urban legend? But it actually has a really interesting story. And I think for that reason, it feels like an amazing sequel that just gets a lot of unwarranted hate, I feel, because it doesn't that title screen, I forgot how bad it was until I was watching it again. But it's just I feel like it has a really important kind of story, and the way they sort of delve into the connections between what's happened to Sam and what happened to Mary, and just everything sort of repeating itself, which just like hits home a lot. It just makes a lot of sense. So I feel like it's just, I just want to like fight people. I've been like, it's fine if you don't like it, if you've really watched it, but if you just heard that it's got bad effects, then please like actually just watch it and see what you think.
Donato, I want to ask, is this something that has come up for you before? Because I know you dive into remakes an awful lot. Was this a first time watch for you?
Well, I mean, like, no, this was a first time watch. Like, this definitely, I had seen the first Urban Legend. I still haven't seen Final Cut either. So This was very much a second viewing in the trilogy, I guess I could say. so still missing on the middle. But I mean, like that whole 2000 era, that was still when I was avoiding horror very much. Like that was still when I really wasn't into it. And I shouldn't say avoiding, I was coming into it, early 2000s, but still just way as an outsider. So a straight to VOD sequel, again, to call up those marketing images, are very, very not good. There's some Photoshop ass high school class, first time I've ever used it, marketing. But at the same time, like it does have way more of a message for 2005, I think, especially when you think about when it was released. I mean, the opening of this film is so very, well, I shouldn't say the opening. I think the first 20 minutes are so very upfront about like, no, we're going to tell a story about how like women are the victims here and like men are in a society that's completely patriarchal. Like they just, maybe it's because it's not subtle at all that people kind of like look at it that way. But I don't know. I'm kind of the camp that like, yeah, we're beyond subtlety at this point for a lot of messages, because the movie itself, as you just brought up, Kim, like it is about history repeating itself. It is about the gorilla imagery and hearing the teacher talk about how alpha males dominate society. And also how in the beginning, Kate Mara's character would definitely have a date to the dance if she wasn't such an outspoken feminist. But like, you know, they're doing that purposely. It's not a thing of like, oh, we're going to, you know, throw this in your face and preach about it. Like, no, we're doing this because it's 2023 and we're still having movies with the same theme, because since 2005, has anything really gotten better?
And it's interesting to me because you talk about special effects and the direct-to-video ness of the film, but this sits at a really interesting point in sort of film distribution history, I think, because I wanted to look it up to make sure that I had the date right on that. Netflix as a streaming service launched in January in 2007. This movie launched or was released on video in July 2005, which makes it one of the last sort of in that tail end of pre-streaming direct-to-video releases, when that was still the dominant channel for this. And so watching the movie, it's the first time watch for me as well, it's doing a lot of things that I think it sits sort of at the intersection of a couple of different periods in film history, which I think is really interesting. Yes, it has what we would think of as a little bit of like the hallmarky, you know, editing to move it from like plot point to plot point to plot point, kind of a disjointed, you know, speed that it moves through the first couple of scenes, especially in present day. The special effects are direct to video budget caliber, but it's also recognizing, I think, and Kim, this goes to exactly what you're saying, Donato, I agree with you. It's recognizing that horror can be a message medium. And so a lot of what it has to say and how it works that into it feels very contemporary. That feels like, you know, a film that would have been released a few years later and feels right in line with a lot of modern horror. So it's a fascinating thing to kind of watch, because you can kind of see, you know, if you think of the weird thing that popped to mind for me is that like that famous image of the evolution of man, right? Going from like fish to human, like you can locate it on that and be like, oh, this is where the horror genre went from like the write-off, you know, direct to video thing to like streaming and home video and second tier distribution being a viable form for like memorable and genre defining horror. So it's as a historian, like the former college writer in me wants to be like, oh, I could write 1,000 essays about what this represents for a genre that was in transition.
Yeah, and I think it fits quite well into the urban legend like trilogy, because the first one's very much about like the killer like being raging and getting revenge on people who like wronged her. The second one's not really about that at all, but then the third one kind of takes it back to that. So I do think they fit quite well together in that respect. And I do like the fact that, you know, the first two films did a lot of urban legend based kills, but they were sort of running out of, I guess, things that they could do realistically. I think making this one supernatural sort of opened the door for them to just do whatever they wanted. Like, it doesn't have to be something that a killer in a like big jacket with a hood could set up in 20 minutes and then run off screen. It's something that like a ghost can do. So I think it allowed them to do a lot more kind of bananas kills that they wouldn't have been able to do in the other films, and sort of expand the urban legend mythos like that way. I do think the kind of spider death scene, the effects aren't great on those spiders, but I also think that is one of the best death scenes. Like the whole it's really brutal because she peels like her entire face off and it's like gushing blood and there's like glass stuck in it and things. I think like had that just had better spiders, like I think more people would probably be talking about how good it was and how brutal it was. And I mean, they also have a get toasted in a sunbed scene. Everyone loves the one from Final Destination 3, but no one's talking about the one in Urban Legend, which is a shame because that's it's fun as well. So yeah, I think I like that they sort of brought it back to its like kind of female revengey roots, and yeah, gave us sort of more wondrous urban legends that we wouldn't have got in the other films. I think it sort of added something a bit extra with that.
It also feels very, people said this online too when I just posted about watching the film, but it feels very like Mary Lou, like the Prom Night 2.
Yeah, 100%.
Like the ties are all there where it's calling back to it. And it is funny you mentioning Final Destination, because that my thought too, like half the kills in here, the bug face, the spider face was done in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The
Yes.
tanning bed sequence was done in Final Destination. I'm sure plenty of other times, other places, but this isn't going to get talked about because unfortunately with the tanning bed, you see the after effects of like the completely charred and roasted corpse, which does all the work. Like it's gnarly. But I guess like people might talk about Final Destination because that one is actually, you see more of it as it's happening, as it's blistering. And yeah, the spider death scene, again, I will fully admit that those spiders do not look very real at all. But when you go back to the one of Scariest Stories to Tell in the Dark, like those weren't real spiders either. Those were computerized as well. And like, they were better, but they were still the same thing. So yeah, like 100%, the comparison points are all there to other kind of films. And again, like the Mary Lou plot lines and the parallels there, like I think they're actually pretty good too, the way they pull that off. And you said like at the beginning, you're like, they made a Supernatural like sequel. Like, why go supernatural? But I think that falls in line with franchise filmmaking. You've done the thing where it's the killer who is just a human using urban legends as a guise or as a cover up for their murders. When no, we're on the third film. We're on this sequel. We're Friday the 13th where we do the carry. We're Friday the 13th where he's now going to hell and stuff like that. Like that's how franchises work, and you want to switch things up. So I think it's refreshing to think the whole time it's going to be who we think it is. They set it up pretty clearly. We have another hooded cloaked killer, but no, like this straight up is the vengeance that is still so very due. Like it is such a cathartic ending there when you get there.
Yeah, and I think I think it is very similar to like Prom Night 2. There's no doubt there's a lot of the same kind of plot points, and I guess they did the same, like chucking in a supernatural sequel after a sort of normal one. But I think Prom Night 2 can sort of portray Mary Lou a bit too villainous, I guess, for me. They make her seem like they're like, oh, she's quite promiscuous at the start, and that's why this happens, even though we know he's the bad guy. And then they make her seem like she's enjoying it a bit too much. I think Urban Legends sort of takes the same kind of story and definitely frames it as, yes, these teenagers are getting brutally murdered, but it's definitely their parents' fault. Like it's nothing to do with Mary, which I don't necessarily agree with them having to make her like completely virginal at the start to get that point across. But I do sort of like that they sort of take that aspect, but very much like you're never like sort of not on Mary's side. And I think that's quite good, the fact that they told us the story in the beginning, because I guess if Sam had sort of had to work out what was going on along the way, and then like halfway through we discovered what happened to Mary, we might have been like kind of, it might have been a bit more villainy portrayal halfway through. But I think the fact that right up front we get this story of what happened to her and her friends, and then sort of see the consequences that come from that. She's never really portrayed as a bad guy. It's more just using her undead powers to get her revenge rather than being the bad guy. It's very much kind of focused on the football team and all the sort of powerful, popular adults in the town who just have like had nothing happen to them, no repercussions at all, even though like everyone at the school must have seen Mary with those guys that night. Like they didn't even like remotely investigate what happened. It's just sort of this way that the kind of perpetrators, and one of them's a woman as well. It's not all men. It's one of the and her daughter I think gets the worst death. And I don't know, it feels like Mary's friend Grace as well seems most hateful towards like Heather's mum for being involved in it. It's like the sort of implication that if you are perpetuating the patriarchy as a woman, like you're even worse. So she gets the most graphic, like prolonged violent death, which is a bit harsh. But I sort of like the fact that she's never sort of presented as the bad guy. She is just trying to get her story uncovered and build this connection with Sam so that she can give her strong enough visions to know what actually happened to her, and so that she can get sort of peace. I guess maybe if she'd found that peace a bit earlier, she might not have turned to the murder, but it's sort of the path that she ended on, because it's been like 35 years that she's sort of been just not forgotten about, because the town clearly still talks about her enough as she's turned into this urban legend, but just no one really cares enough to actually find out what happened to her. They just want to like keep her as this like mystical thing in the background.
Well, yeah, it's also the Nightmare on Elm Street of it all. Like it's the sins of our fathers that our children pay for, whatever the exact quote is. And again, I kind of like that, where they're keeping Mary Lou as this mysterious being and keeping that urban legend buried. But, you find out they're doing that because, once again, the town is still being run by the same pieces of shit, the history repeating itself, go right back to the themes of the movie. And again, like, I think it's unfair to bash a movie for being unsubtle. It really just comes down to the story it wants to tell, and it comes down to the fact that, like, I've written so many reviews at this point, and absolutely there are times when I'm like, cool, this delivery doesn't work because it is completely bashing me over the head, but it doesn't have it doesn't have the intelligence to do what it's doing. Like, you can keep bashing me over the head, but it's when it's simple, and when it's not actually delving into anything, you're just telling me what I already know. And there are times when I'm like, cool, the subtlety here is what makes it. Like there are so many different ways to do that right. And I think this film, Bloody Mary, kind of, it does a decent, I'm not going to say it does an amazing job. Like, I'm not going to say it's the best representation of it at all, but I think it does a decent job of being in your face about something that is very, topical, that is still topical. And, it doesn't really give a damn to hide what it's saying. And the way that it does it and the way that it pulls it off, it works in again, certain regards. Don't expect a 5 out of 5 movie, but it does for us. Again, for a 2005 straight to video film that got no promotion, I'm sure, and all that stuff. Like, it's telling a story that ain't worth getting pushed under a rug.
And I want to ask Kim, because film is a collaborative medium, but we have a lot of discussions as film critics and as film lovers about the difference of who's directing, right? Mary Lambert, iconic filmmaker, cult icon within the horror community. Pet Sematary, has been working in and out of television, has a lot of films to her name. She's kind of, especially with the sequel or the remake of Pet Sematary a few years ago, has sort of reemerged and sort of earned her spot among the canon of like 80s and 90s horror filmmakers in a way that I think everybody's really excited about. But I would love your perspective on the difference for this story about sexual violence, about a culture of silence, all of these elements that we see a lot in horror films. And these are two male screenwriters that are tackling the material. We see these themes pop up a lot in horror. Is there a noticeable difference? Should audiences feel a difference in how that material is handled and what the gaze of the film is, because it's Mary Lambert directing it and not, somebody else trying to tackle this material? What do you think it makes a difference?
I mean, it's always a weird sentence to say, but I am a big fan of like rape revenge films and things in general. I do think you can usually tell the difference when it's sort of directed by a woman versus directed by men. But then I also like love the original I Spit on Your Grave and things. I don't like have an issue with them. I just think sometimes the story can be told a little bit better. The like you said, the sort of gaze of the victim a lot of the time, and a lot of the time the actual like assault scenes themselves, if it can be sort of filmed from a different perspective, can sort of make or break the film, really. I think Mary Lambert was a good choice for this one, because I feel like in the Pet Sematary films, they obviously are a horror and there's a lot of grotesque imagery, but the sort of important message the whole time is this underlying thing of like grief. In the first one and even the second one, which is a bit more like bonkers and a lot more just kind of like body horror and like pus and stuff, there's still this whole thing of the title character in that one sort of having lost his mother and having this sort of grief that runs through him the whole time, and so I think even though this film, even though Urban Legend is sort of a bit about bonkers and kind of supernatural, I do think that it's thanks to Mary Lambert that the story feels like it's very focused on Mary and Sam's character and their connection and sort of the similarities and what happened to them. And it feels like the way kind of Sam is dealing with her trauma and not having a lot of help from like her parents, or like people's are avoiding her at school, like parents are telling her that it was her fault, like the police don't want to like investigate it, and even her like two best friends that got kidnapped with her don't really want to seem like to be a part of it afterwards. It's only really her and her brother that are
they're
like
gone like halfway through the film. We just never they kind of consciously peace out. It's not an accidental, it's not like the screenwriters forgot, but they're sort of like, we're not gonna do this whole thing you're working on right now.
They don't want to be like, they didn't really want to be involved in her whole like writing the story in the first place, so I guess they're kind of worried about their like popularity. But I do feel it feels like the same kind of thing, like the remake of Pet Sematary, I feel like missed that whole thing of the underlying grief and the like Rachel's relationship with death and how her and like Lewis deal with it differently, and the I think that they miss that. So even though it's very obvious in the Stephen King story, I feel like it's dependent on who's handling it, the way that it comes across. Whereas I feel like in the original Pet Sematary film, that is always like there, the way that Lewis and Rachel are kind of struggling with that grief. And so I feel like Mary Lambert did a similarly good job of sort of keeping that front and center, like, yeah, never making Mary the villain, always sort of investigating what happened to her. Like Sam is obviously getting haunted by this scary looking thing that like Mary doesn't have the best like I'm a dead person makeup, but she's meant to look scary. And even Sam's not really that freaked out. She's like, oh my god, there's something happening with this person, like we need to figure out what it is, why these people are dying. Like it's all very focused on their sort of shared trauma and this sort of similar experience that a lot of people have gone through, and sort of, yeah, painting the rest of the town as the bad guys. So I feel like in other hands it could have been come across like very just like supernatural slashery and not really focused on that as much. And yeah, maybe it kind of made Mary come across as the bad guy, or make out like she was scaring Sam or whatever, and Sam was kind of being scared into helping her, whereas it feels very much like Sam is helping her because she recognizes that like some injustice has happened and she needs to save her. And I think that's nice. So yeah, I do think that in other hands it might have not come across as well as it did. Yeah, I bet you're right, it's not the like a 5-star representation, but I do feel like when I watched Carrie when I was a teenager, I didn't get a lot of the sort of rape revenge sort of jock culture, boys will be boys kind of element of it, and now when I watch that when I'm older, I sort of get a lot of that. And I feel like you maybe do sometimes need these sort of simple representations of those more complicated issues to get them across to like younger women like me. The New Black Christmas from 2019 sort of did the same kind of thing of just bringing that kind of, yeah, that kind of like culture like into the thing. It doesn't have to be this like complicated representation that some horror films go for. You can just go for a simple one and tell that story and address it, because I bet there's loads of people who know guys like that at high school, or people who are their friends currently, and maybe seeing it like on film like that, they'll be like, oh shit, actually are we the baddies? Yeah, it turns out we are. So I think that can be a good thing. It doesn't always need to be some clever horror allegory kind of thing. It could just be straight in your face and kind of paint it. So I think Mary Lambert did a very good job of that. I think she probably, I saw some reviews on Letterboxd and I was looking at it because I think my like 3.5-star rating is like the highest one that it has, and people were like, oh my god, what was Mary Lambert doing? And I was like, no, you know what, I think she was a great choice. She knows how to kind of handle that kind of sensitive topic and still make it a horror film. And yeah, maybe if she just had a bit more budget for effects and stuff, it would have been, people would have liked it a bit more. I don't think there's anything wrong with the plot or anything like that. I just think, yeah, it's maybe just the connection to the rest of the series it gets kind of looked down on. But yeah, I think she did a great job. I think she's good at sort of looking at the underlying message of things and making sure that that's kind of present in every scene, the weaving its way through the whole film and not just something that's kind of tacked on at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like the spiders are not her fault. The ending with whatever kind of witchy, weird holographic imagery are going on, not her fault. Like the visual effects are what they are because, again, this is a straight-to-video movie in a time when straight-to-video movies were not given the same time of day. So like, you know the movie you're making with the money you're making. So you do bring up exactly what you said, Kim, like the filmmaker who can keep the emotional core there, who can keep the themes and the storytelling there and work around the fact that, like, listen, we're going to do what we can for these kill sequences. We're going to do what we can for the supernatural sequences. But, you know, what can we really do? And I mean, like, we're also kind of leaving out that this is co-written by Michael Dougherty from Trick or Treat and stuff like that. So, like, you have Michael Dougherty's name on the screenplay. You have Mary Lambert as a filmmaker, starring Kate Mara, a very obviously young Kate Mara, who's like not as well known at the time. But like all the kind of pieces are here. It's like they did put care in to like try to make the best film they could. It's just an unfortunate thing that sometimes, you know, you are a slave to the budget. You're a slave to what you can do. But I like to think that they brought all those people in and, you know, put this movie together because they didn't want to just churn something out. Like they brought everyone together to be like, all right, here's the deal. Here's what you can do and what you can get away with. Go forth, and we trust you as a creative team. So yeah, really a really interesting scenario, just like across the board.
And Donato, you listed a bunch of names, but there was one name you didn't list, which I think is before we wrap the episode, I want to talk a little bit about Tina Lifford as Grace Taylor. Because there's a thing, and I'm sure both of you sort of experienced it. There are a lot of times when I watch horror, especially older horror, I find myself connecting to a film intellectually, right? I'm like thinking about its place in history, thinking about where the culture was at, and a lot of that stuff is like happening. So I can enjoy a movie and not actually like emotionally enjoy a movie and be like, oh, this is really interesting. From the moment that Grace Taylor came on the screen, the adult version of Grace Taylor came on the screen, I was completely in the bag for this film for the rest of it because one, she opens the door. The first line that Tina Lifford delivers is "Power to the people, free Angela Davis. What's happening?" That's our introduction to the character. But it's also, a lot of these movies present. There's always, whenever you do like these, like before and after type horror stories, right? There's always somebody who serves as the storyteller, the person that was alive then and comes, and they're always the same kind of like craggy old, and they kind of set that up a little bit with the coach, like this craggy old, like, scary looking white male who's like, oh, you didn't know this happened. And instead we've got like this, pothead hippie who's delightful and is telling the story, passing along this information in a way that I've never seen before. So before we kind of wrap and talk about the impact of the film, I want to ask both of you, like, are you with me on Grace Taylor? Were you feeling Grace Taylor the way that I was in this movie?
Yeah, I thought she was great. Like, I do think it was a good idea to sort of have her come back, and it sort of told like a different angle of the trauma as well, obviously, because she, I'm never quite sure if she actually remembered who was involved or if she was just saying that she couldn't remember, but it was clearly, this is what the football team had done to them when they were just there being the slightly weird girls at high school. Like, what were they going to do if they actually like accused them of killing their pal? Like, she just didn't want to be a part of that, but she obviously did want to help Mary. So it was a very like interested, conflicted representation of this different kind of trauma where she actually got drugged and dumped in the woods and but survived. So it was a totally different story angle, and I liked the whole element of her and Sam kind of teaming up at the end to take down the one like remaining guy who had kind of done all this, because the other friend of Mary and Grace had died sort of in between that time. So it was just kind of her and Sam left to kind of fight that battle. So it was really interesting. And I guess they sort of used her as a vehicle to sort of get, was she so obsessed with urban legends just because Mary was like visiting her? Or did she just like them anyway? Because there was so much like, and she obviously got the sort of reference that connected back to urban legends too, to sort of be like, yes, this does take place in the same universe. This world is just, there's a lot of urban legend deaths happening in this world. But so yeah, I think it was definitely a lot more interesting to use her rather than like having it seemed like the coach might have like turn into a good guy at some point, or a bit like kind of prom night too, when he was a bit scared and he'd be like, oh, I'll come forward. But then it turned out he was the worst, because he gave the football team the idea, oh, by the way, me and my pals when we were younger, we like drugged these women and took, like, you should do that. Like, get your revenge. Like, he was as bad. So it was nice to use her as well, and sort of make her part of the Scooby Gang at the end for the final fight.
Yeah, it continues the theme. It continues everything that's going on here, and once again goes back to the fact that like this is thought out. Whatever you're seeing visually on screen, again, you can have your comments on. Totally understandable, but what is there in storytelling, what is there in what is wanting to be represented, that is once again what everyone was focused on. So when you have a character, again, like Grace is having. Sorry, like the actress is having a lot of fun playing Grace. Like yes. Obviously, like there is the hippie element, the pot smoking element, like all that, whatever you want to get into it, like it's there, but it's also once again not that same Brian Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio kind of character who is gonna tell you some things and then kick you out of his house or something like that. Like this is fun having her go on that ride. And again, like having someone stand with Sam, and you have the 2 generational thing. You have someone who's went through it and someone who's going through it again. And there is power to the fact that like they team up to be like, nah, we're done with this shit. Like this has to end. And fuck you, Ed Marino.
Yeah, and if we're gonna ding the film for some of the special effects that don't work, then we got to give credit for all of the set design in Grace's house, especially the set design for the artwork and the urban, like the
Mm-hmm.
urban red legends, Charlie Day pinboard that she's got going on in that room, because that is there is a lot of care that went into that artwork, and there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
care that went into setting that up. And I think that those little touches are where you recognize the difference between it was never going to happen and there were like, you watch a lot of horror films, they don't have anything, and you're like, there was never going to be stuff here for me to sink my teeth into. You watch that, you're like, oh, it was just like you said, Donato, just a budget thing. There were a couple obstacles that kept it from getting to that next level, but the vision is there, the artistry is there for sure. Well, the last question, Kim, that we always ask our guests then is, how does this film become unforgotten? How does it find its audience? And I think this movie has a few things going for it. It's tacked onto a major franchise. It has a handful: Doherty, Lambert, the Maras. You know, it has some names that are higher profile than what we usually typically watch.
Mm-hmm.
But I want your thoughts on where you think the future of this movie is going to be in the 2000s horror canon that we still haven't gotten around to developing yet.
Yeah, I think I mean, it definitely felt a bit forgotten for me. Like I said, I was a huge fan of the first two, and I just sort of missed. I don't even know if I knew this one definitely existed for a while. So I'm definitely part of part of the problem, just discovering it myself. But I do think, like, picture it, I guess, more as like a kind of feminist fight the patriarchy kind of horror film, and just recognizing that it does have its flaws, it isn't perfect. But I also think, as horror fans, we're usually quite forgiving of that in general. Like, there's some amazing films out there that didn't like have the budget or were released at the wrong time and just haven't quite hit the mark, but you can recognize the sort of story and what they were going for. And I think this is definitely one of those examples. So I think I mean, there are supernatural sequels that have come out that aren't very great. Like the last I know we did last summer film was just a bit a bit weird. But this one, yeah, you can. I feel that you can tell that they cared, and I think like it can be very easy to just churn out sequels for horror films as sort of a cash grab kind of thing. I feel like portraying this one as one that they cared about adding to the sort of urban legend world, and two cared about telling a story that wasn't just a kind of straight up like, look at all these teenagers die thing. It was it had a lot of a deeper meaning to it. And I do yeah, we were talking about films I can't wait to show my daughter. I can't wait to start showing her like feminist kick-ass women kind of horror films, to just sort of prove, you know, a lot of horror is just a lot of women getting like horribly murdered and horrible things done to them by men. It's nice to see the ones where they sort of group together and get the chance to like just kind of start fighting back right from the start. And she's Sam's sort of trying to weed out everything that happened in the town like right from the beginning, and like before the horror even starts, she's like tackling the football team and the sort of general shitness of high school. And we don't really have that whole like sports emphasis over here in Scotland as much, but high school is still terrible, and teenage boys particularly were super nice to the weirdo looking girls. So yeah, I think it's just sort of trying to clear people's preconceptions about what a direct to video, 7 years later urban legend sequel would be, and sort of have a look at the story. I do say that though, I have seen the letterbox reviews of people who've watched it and are just like, I hate this, and that's fair enough. But I do think yeah, probably people like I was in the start, who have just sort of looked at the DVD cover art and gone, oh man, that looks questionable. I would suggest, yeah, just actually watching it. And I mean, I think it's great. I don't even think it's not even got bad acting or anything. Like Kate Mara and that are great in it. It's just like, it has a lot going for it compared to like other stuff that I've watched that's quite beloved for being like a terrible film. I would love to see this kind of get that status of like, oh, it's got some things wrong with it, but it is like good. And I think it's got a bit of a deeper story and some cool death scenes, which is just what you want in horror, a combo of the two.
Donato, anything to add?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, like, thinking about how you can bring it into the contemporary and how you can really get people looking at it. Honestly, if you do pair it with Mary Lou, like if you do a double feature of pairing with Prom Night 2 and then immediately playing Bloody Mary, whether it's Joe Bob doing it on, you know, his show or somebody just doing it in a theater somewhere, I think that's how you reignite the conversation around it. And because, again, like you just said, the conversation around this film is largely fuck this. So, like, I don't want to watch this. It's bad, blah, blah, blah. So I think once you get away from the general horror consensus, though, and the general horror, not to say it in a negative, but like the general horror fan, because they are going in there going, all I want is kills, all I want is this, all I want is that. Like a certain level of horror fan. I'm not saying all, I'm not saying that's what it is. But, for a lot of the more outspoken ones, that is what they're looking for. And this movie will not give you what you want in those degrees if that's all you want. But for all the reasons we've talked about, for all the reasons that people are now going into horror movies and looking for things beyond the gore and beyond the visual, I think this is pretty primed to be rediscovered in certain ways. And once again, I'm not saying that means it's perfect and has to work for you, but I think if you play it back to back with something like Prom Night 2, Mary Lou, it does compare and contrast. It does both of them because, Kim, you said before how it doesn't do everything that Mary Lou does. And, to show them together and to kind of show the two ways that you can go about this, cathartic vengeance, we'll say, I think it's a pretty nice little double bill that will give it more attention. So something of that nature. But, it's going to be hard pressed to find a re-release or anything like that that is worthy of a boutique label or something.
Hey, if they ever do it, though, I'm available to write essays about it.
There you go.
Mary, if you're listening, Kim needs to be your first phone call.
Oh yeah, I wrote an article once about like Pet Sematary 1 and 2, and I put it on Twitter, and Mary Lambert retweeted it, and that was like the highlight of my life. I don't think I could get any higher than that. So maybe if I just like slid into her DMs, she would at least know who it was.
just put it there. Be like, just this is for you, an entire podcast episode on Bloody Mary. Well, Kim, it was great to have you on the show today. And we want to give you a chance to talk about where to find your writing or the things that you're working on. So this is your window. If folks want to learn more, if they want to follow your work at Ghouls and elsewhere, what's the best place to connect with you online?
So I'm on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Wicked Sister 69 because I picked my handle when I was 15 and I haven't changed it. I'm also on TikTok at Little Red Horror. But I write for Ghouls. I write at least monthly. I do my Mother in Horrors column. And I also write a bunch of kind of lists and stuff for them. And then I also have my own blog, which is Little Red Horror, where I just write either lists or sort of big sprawling retrospective pieces that I don't have to worry about anyone else editing the word count. I just did one about like Mia and Cheryl in Evil Dead and the Evil Dead, sort of comparing them. And then I just did a list of like top camera related moments in horror films. That kind of stuff, if that's your bag. Those are the two sort of main places. But if you follow me on Twitter, if I'm ever anywhere else, I tweet about it constantly. So that'd be the best place to find my stuff.
That's great. Donato, how do folks connect with you and what you're working on?
Same spiel as always. You can find me at DonatoBomb on Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, and Blue Sky. I fuck around on the TikToks. I say it every time. Follow me there, but it's nothing special. And I just got more writing coming out the wazoo. I had nothing really call out. Just lots of festivals on the horizon. Your Fantasias, or depending on when this posts, I'm probably posting some Fantasia stuff. Fantastic coming up. And just your slew of regular reviews in IGN/Film Bloody, blah, blah, blah.
Busy time of year for us horror fans. As for myself, you can follow me at Blue Sky, Monocle at bluesky.app, or whatever the hell that super long thing is. I hope they change that someday. And that's pretty much it. If you Google me, you'll find me. I have a good SEO name, and I'm grateful to my parents for that. But I would encourage you also to go check out certifiedforgotten.com, because am I correct in remembering that this may not be the only Bloody Mary content that we are getting from Kim in the foreseeable future? Is that I feel like that's correct.
Well, by the time this posts, because we were talking in the past and this is the future, there is something already on certifiedforgotten.com. Unless we have fucked up tremendously. We gotta
figure this out. Like it has already happened, and if it hasn't happened, then forget we said anything. It'll definitely happen in the future. But you'll get more. If this was not enough, you'll get more as well. So we're excited to be able to run that soon, or to have run that already, whichever it is. Again, Kim, we just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. And we are going to sign off as we normally do, with Donato doing something weird.